When we talk about rates and ratios, we're looking at applications of our fractions knowledge. A ratio shows the relative sizes or magnitude of two or more values. It is a comparison using division. Fractions are representations of division, so therefore ratios and rates are representations of division. There are three different ways that you often will see a ratio represented. Let's look at the ratio of oranges to apples. First off, the order matters. We're looking at oranges to apples. There's 4 oranges and 2 apples. So as a fraction, we read it numerator to denominator. So this would be 4 oranges to 2 apples. As with any fraction, we need to simplify it down. This would be 2 to 1. It is a 2 to 1 ratio. Odds notation is just another way of representing the fraction version of a ratio. Instead of reading it numerator to denominator, we would read it from left to right. So now we have a 2 to 1 ratio. Again, that would be a 2 to 1 ratio. Notice that both the colon in odds notation and the fraction bar in fraction, they represent the word 2 when we're reading a ratio. To represent it as a percentage, we need to think back to our knowledge of percentages and fractions. I could set up a proportion, or I could divide things straight out and then turn a decimal into a percent. We'll use the shortcut instead of using the proportion method. So I'd look at my fraction, 2 over 1. I would take 2 divided by 1 equals 2. That's my decimal, so that's my value. I need to move it 2 places over to turn a decimal into a percent. 1, 2 place values, because what we're really doing here is multiplying by 100, so I have a 200% ratio. On your own, switch things around. Find the fraction, odds notation, and percentage representation of the ratio of apples to oranges. Compare the first 3 answers we did and the second 3 that you're going to try. Ask yourself the question, are these ratios the same? How do you know? We're dealing with the same values, but the order has changed. Ratios are a very real-world applied use of fractions, so you'll see them pop up more in word problems or situation-based questions. Recipes, especially baking, have a lot to do with proportions and ratios. If the ingredients don't stay within the same ratio, the flavor will not come out the same, or the cookie will be harder or softer or drier. Because we'll be dealing with more word problems in this unit, it's very helpful to try to express or describe these rates in words. Just like in English class, if you're trying to understand a scenario, summarizing it in your own words helps. So if we look at this first example, what is the ratio of chocolate chips to flour? Well, I can look. In my recipe, it calls for 4 cups of chocolate chips. It calls for 6 cups of flour. The order matters. So if I had to write this out in words, it would be 4 cups of chocolate chips to 6 cups of flour. This rewords the question so I can understand it better, plus it sets my numbers up in the right order. 4 cups of chocolate chips to 6 cups of flour as a fraction would be 4 to 6. If I simplify that down, my fraction is 2 to 3. It's a 2 to 3 ratio. Going from fractions to odd notation, we're just turning it on its side. 2 to 3. To make a percentage, I can use my shortcut, 2 divided by 3 in my calculator, and either multiply by 100 or move that decimal 2 place values over to the right, and we get 66.7%. In our next example, what is the ratio of flour to sugar? Well, we have 6 cups of flour, the recipe calls for, and 3 cups of sugar. So I want to describe that. I want to reword it to make sure that I understand the entire situation. So I would say there's 6 cups of flour to 3 cups of sugar. So for every 6 cups of flour, I need 3 cups of sugar to keep my recipe within the right ratios. I understand the situation a little bit better, plus I have my numbers written out in order. This is a ratio of 6 to 3. If I simplify that down, that's a 2 to 1 ratio. I take my fraction, I turn it on its side, now it's an odds notation, 2 to 1 ratio. I can take my fraction and turn it into a percentage. 2 divided by 1 is 2. Multiply that by 100 to get 200%. On your own, try the next 2 examples. Write out the ratio in words, represented as a fraction, in odds notation, and as a percent. In order to prepare for tomorrow's activity, please fill out this small questionnaire. Tomorrow we'll review ratios in relation to your shoe size, age, number of siblings, number of pets, and the number of states that you've visited compared to a partner.